He made millions laugh as Mr. Humphries, but behind the glitter and catchphrases, John Inman was quietly battling resentment, betrayal, and cold shoulders from his very own co-stars. Now, for the first time, we reveal the 5 cast members he reportedly hated the most, and the jaw-dropping reasons why. From jealousy over awards to cruel pranks and silent feuds, the truth behind the set of Are You Being Served is darker than you ever imagined. Who mocked his costumes? Who shut him out completely? Stay with us as we uncover the hidden drama behind one of Britain's most beloved comedies. How success changed. John Inman. John Inman's rise to fame wasn't just fast, it was explosive. When Are You Being Served aired, his character, Mr. Humphries, became an instant fan favorite. Audiences adored his flamboyant charm, his cheeky humor, and his unforgettable catchphrases. But while the viewers loved him, not everyone behind the scenes was clapping. Some of his co-stars grew uncomfortable as his popularity began to eclipse theirs. At first, things were cordial. The cast worked together like any sitcom family. But as letters poured in and John began appearing in TV specials, jealousy crept in. He went from a few lines to being the whole show, a crew member later said. Some actors, especially those with theater backgrounds, felt sidelined. They believed the show's original balance had shifted unfairly in John's favor. Inman didn't chase the spotlight. He became the spotlight. He was voted BBC TV Personality of the Year in 1976 and named TV Time's Funniest Man on Television. Producers started giving him more screen time, more punchlines, and more presence. That move didn't sit well with cast members who had trained for years and expected equal recognition. It became clear that behind the laughter on screen, egos were quietly clashing. John began to withdraw from group cast events and interviews. He knew some of his peers resented him, and it weighed on him. He once admitted, "Fame is wonderful, but it changes the way people look at you, especially when you're standing next to them." While he remained professional, the tension lingered, setting the stage for years of icy stares and quiet hostility. You'd think success would bring people closer, but sometimes it draws a line you can't cross. John Inman. The cracks in those friendships started to widen, and one of the earliest and most personal feuds was with someone he shared the most scenes with. She was witty, iconic, and beloved by fans, but behind the cameras, John Inman and Molly Sugden had anything but a warm friendship. Molly Sugden. Molly Sugden and John Inman had electric chemistry on screen. As Mrs. Slocombe and Mr. Humphries, their back-and-forth banter became a highlight of the show. But the sharp wit didn't end when the director yelled, "Cut!" Behind the scenes, their dynamic was far more tense and often cold. Molly was a seasoned performer with years of stage experience. She viewed herself as a traditional comedic actress, while Inman's camp style felt too showy to her. She thought he was playing it for laughs too much, one insider recalled. When producers began writing more jokes for Inman, Molly was reportedly not amused. She began pushing for more of her own character's storylines, hinting that the balance had shifted unfairly. Their professional rivalry soon became personal. Inman felt that Molly took jabs at his sexuality in subtle ways. Never overt, but often pointed. She made comments during press interviews like, "The show's about the whole store, not just one person prancing about," which many believed was aimed directly at John. He never responded publicly, but he confided in friends that the remarks stung deeply. During later seasons, their scenes were increasingly filmed with rehearsals kept to a minimum. Co-stars said the two barely spoke off camera, Still, they managed to deliver comedy gold on screen, which only made their quiet feud more fascinating. It was professional on the surface, but personal behind closed doors. Some people pretend to be friends for the camera. Then the lights go out, and the cold sets in. Former cast technician. But Molly Sugden wasn't the only cast member John clashed with. Another woman on the show, younger and sharp-tongued, kept her distance and her opinions. Wendy Richards' chilly demeanor was well known, but with Inman, things went even colder. What began as indifference turned into something far deeper. Wendy Richard. Wendy Richard was already known for being guarded and private. But with John Inman, that guardedness turned into full-on emotional distance. While their characters, Miss Brahms and Mr. Humphries, shared witty moments on screen, behind the scenes, they barely exchanged a word. Their professional coexistence was built on silence. Unlike John, who thrived on flamboyant energy, Wendy was all business. She came to set, delivered her lines, and left. Their styles clashed. She reportedly disliked John's camp humor, calling it over the top in private conversations. Some crew members recalled hearing her say, "This isn't panto. It's supposed to be a comedy, not a circus." Inman took those comments personally, even if she never said them to his face. There were also political and personal differences. Wendy's conservative views clashed with John's identity and flamboyance. She had little patience for gossip, makeup chair banter, or the theatrical side of showbiz. When asked if she was close to any of her co-stars, she once responded, "I wasn't there to make friends, I was there to do the work." That answer may have been general, but John felt it was about him. Years later, after both had moved on from the show, Inman reflected on the cast relationships in a rare interview. "Some people you work with, and that's all it is," he said. "You respect them, but that doesn't mean you ever understand them." With Wendy, there was no blowout, no dramatic falling out, just years of cold, careful distance. Not every wall is built out of bricks. Some are made from silence. John Inman. And while the women brought one kind of tension, it was a male co-star who delivered a different kind of resentment. Trevor Bannister once believed "Are You Being Served?" was built around him. But when John Inman stole the spotlight, things turned from friendly to bitter. From star to bitter exit. When Are You Being Served was first conceived, it wasn't Mr. Humphries who was supposed to shine. It was Mr. Lucas, played by Trevor Bannister. He was cast as the cheeky young male lead, and for the first few seasons, he had top billing. But as John Inman's popularity exploded, the balance shifted, and so did Trevor's attitude. Trevor was a trained actor, well respected in stage circles, and had real hopes that Are You Being Served would be his breakout role. In the early years, his character got the jokes, the screen time, and the fan mail. But then, something changed. Mr. Humphries, originally a side character with only a few lines, became the star. And Trevor noticed. Sources close to the set say Trevor struggled to hide his frustration. He reportedly felt the show had been hijacked by silliness, and that Inman's character turned it into a one-man show. During rehearsals, Trevor and John kept things professional, but they weren't exactly friendly. Crew members say Trevor often rolled his eyes during read-throughs of Mr. Humphries's big scenes. He thought the character was a joke, and not in a good way, one writer recalled. By 1980, Trevor had had enough. He left the show, officially citing scheduling conflicts, but insiders believe he walked away because he couldn't stand playing second fiddle to Inman any longer. He didn't sign on to be a supporting act, one castmate said. John, for his part, never publicly commented. But privately, he admitted that Trevor's coldness hurt more than any critic's review. He wanted to be the face of the show. "I just wanted to make people laugh." John Inman. But it wasn't just jealous actors or political differences causing tension. Sometimes it was about the makeup chair, the wardrobe racks, and the layers of wigs and powder. John Inman's most silent battle was with the very tools that made his character iconic, and the people who used them. Costume wars and makeup meltdowns. To the audience, Mr. Humphries was a dazzling character. Flamboyant suits, colorful ties, a perfect poof of hair. But for John Inman, the reality of creating that image every day was exhausting, frustrating, and at times, humiliating. He didn't just dislike the process, he hated it. Inman once admitted in an interview, "It was like becoming someone else every day, and sometimes I hated who that was." The costumes were loud, exaggerated, and often played up stereotypes that made John uncomfortable. He wanted to bring humor to the screen, not be turned into a cartoon. But the production leaned hard into the look, and John had little say in it. The makeup sessions were no better. Hours in the chair, layers of powder, lipstick touch-ups. It all started to wear on him. He reportedly had frequent disagreements with the makeup staff, asking them to tone things down. But the producers wanted more. "More blush, more glitter," one assistant recalled being told. It wasn't about realism, it was about ratings. What made it worse was the way some castmates reacted. A few snickered at his wardrobe behind his back. One allegedly even played a prank by swapping his costume for a women's blouse right before filming. John laughed it off publicly, but he never forgot. Over time, he became more reclusive, arriving late to fittings and skipping makeup rehearsals whenever he could. Being funny doesn't mean being a joke. John Inman. And just when things couldn't get more awkward, a new kind of drama hit the set, one that had nothing to do with scripts or costumes. It involved secret relationships, cheating rumors, and cast members who brought their love lives into the dressing room. For John, it was a line that should never have been crossed. The backstage affair nobody talked about while Are You Being Served delivered laughs on screen. Behind the curtains, real-life drama was unfolding. Rumors swirled that two prominent cast members were involved in a secret affair. It wasn't just gossip. It started to affect everything, from call times to cast morale. And John Inman, ever the observer, had strong feelings about it. Though names were never publicly confirmed, insiders say the affair led to a serious breakdown in professionalism. Arguments between the two lovers became common, some even happening moments before the cameras rolled. John hated it. He believed the show should be a safe, respectful space, not a stage for romantic tantrums. One day, the tension boiled over. The couple had a major argument in the green room, and one stormed off set, delaying filming. John, already stressed from the growing chaos around him, was furious. He reportedly requested that his scenes not overlap with the feuding pair unless absolutely necessary. For someone known to be easygoing, that was a clear sign things had gone too far. It wasn't just the affair. There were whispers of backstage flirtations, betrayal, and even one cast member trying to get another fired after being rejected romantically. John felt trapped in a circus he didn't sign up for. He once told a friend, "This show is about laughs, not lovers. I came here to work, not to watch hearts break. If we can't leave our drama at the door, what's the point of performing?" John Inman. As scandal crept deeper into the cast's personal lives, John began to feel like a stranger among his own colleagues. But the tension wasn't just personal. It was cultural. Underneath the jokes and double entendres, there was a deeper issue: classism, judgment, and subtle digs that made John feel unwelcome in ways that cut deeper than gossip. Classism and prejudice on set. While audiences saw a group of quirky co-workers making each other laugh, behind the scenes, John Inman felt something else entirely: a quiet but constant judgment. It wasn't always spoken aloud, but it was there. Subtle looks, private conversations, and offhand remarks that reminded him not everyone saw him as an equal. John came from humble beginnings in Preston, Lancashire. He didn't have elite schooling or fancy connections. Some of his co-stars came from wealthier, more privileged backgrounds. And even though they all wore the same ridiculous costumes on set, John often felt like he was being looked down on off-camera. "They thought I was a pantomime clown," he once said, "but they never saw how hard I worked." There were comments about his accent: too northern, too common. Crew members overheard castmates laughing about how camp he sounded, or how he didn't fit the mold of a classic British actor. At first, John brushed it off, but over time, it started to wear on him. He realized that no matter how much fame he achieved, to some people on that set, he'd always be less than. One of the hardest parts was watching friendships form without him. The cast sometimes went out for drinks or dinner after filming, but John was rarely invited. Whether it was class, culture, or the quiet homophobia of the era, he always felt a bit like an outsider. It wasn't open hostility. It was something colder: exclusion. They smiled when the cameras rolled, but the warmth never lasted past the credits. John Inman. And while classism and cold shoulders hurt, nothing stung more than what came after John's biggest career moment. When he won a major award and finally got the recognition he deserved, instead of celebrating with him, some castmates turned their backs. What should have been his proudest day only deepened the divide. Jealousy and the BBC Awards drama. In 1976, John Inman was named BBC TV Personality of the Year. It was a huge moment. He'd gone from a small-town theatre performer to one of the most beloved faces on British television. But instead of bringing the cast closer, the award only drove the wedge deeper. The green room wasn't filled with congratulations, it was filled with silence. When John returned to set after the ceremony, he expected at least some applause, a pat on the back, maybe a toast. Instead, it felt like a funeral. One castmate barely acknowledged him. Another joked that the award must have been a slow year for talent. John smiled through it all, but inside, he was crushed. He later said in a private interview that he believed some of his co-stars resented his success. They had trained for years, worked the theater circuit, and here was John, funny, flamboyant, and stealing headlines. For some, it wasn't just envy. It was a belief that he hadn't earned it. That hurt the most. To make things worse, John brought the award to a cast dinner once, hoping to share the joy. But according to one insider, the atmosphere turned icy. No one wanted to talk about it. Some left early. It was clear. This was his moment, not theirs, and they didn't want to be part of it. Sometimes the spotlight shows you who's clapping and who's just standing there in the dark. John Inman. By the time the final seasons rolled around, the divide wasn't just personal, it was professional. Lines were drawn, scenes were shorter, smiles became strained, and what once felt like a family comedy began to feel like a long, awkward goodbye for John. The end of the show didn't bring closure. It brought coldness. silent feuds, and cold shoulders. As Are You Being Served entered its last stretch of episodes, something had clearly changed. The energy on set wasn't what it used to be. Laughter was still written into the scripts, but behind the scenes, it was rare. Cast members who had once shared banter and bonding were now barely speaking, and for John Inman, the chill was impossible to ignore. According to crew who worked on the final seasons, some cast members went out of their way to avoid John. Rehearsals became quiet affairs. Coffee breaks were taken alone. It was like people were just waiting for it to be over, one set assistant remembered. The joy that once made the show sparkle had faded. Scripts began changing, too. Writers started giving Mr. Humphries fewer punchlines. Scenes were trimmed. Moments that once played to John's strengths were reassigned or cut entirely. He noticed. Everyone did, but no one talked about it. Some speculated it was an attempt to rebalance the cast. Others believed it was the producer's way of calming off-screen tension. John stayed professional through it all. He hit his marks, delivered his lines, and never caused trouble. But in private, he admitted the atmosphere was draining. He felt alone in a room full of familiar faces. "It's strange when the people you started with stop looking you in the eye," he once confided. When the final episode aired in 1985, John didn't attend any of the private wrap parties. He quietly bowed out, as if disappearing was easier than pretending. After more than a decade with the same people, he left feeling both celebrated and isolated, a star who had lit up the screen, but who faded alone. "I loved the character. I just wish the people around him had loved me more." John Inman. But even after the cameras stopped rolling, the tension didn't die. When the cast reunited for the spin-off Grace and Favor, old wounds were reopened. For John, what was supposed to be a fresh chapter felt like reliving everything he'd tried to leave behind. The reunion that rekindled resentment after Are You Being Served? Ended, the cast was brought back for a 1990s spin-off called Grace and Favor. The idea was simple: get the gang back together and recapture the magic. But for John Inman, returning to that set meant reopening old wounds. What was marketed as a reunion quickly started to feel like a reckoning. By this point, everyone was older, more experienced, and more set in their ways. From the start, John noticed a shift in the tone. According to reports, some cast members only agreed to return if the show emphasized an ensemble structure, not another Mr. Humphries show. That demand alone reminded John that some grudges never faded. On set, the tension was thick. Though everyone kept things polite, the warmth was gone. During script readings, John noticed changes. Lines that would have naturally gone to Mr. Humphries were now shared out or cut entirely. Producers wanted to avoid friction, but instead, they reignited it. One day, John reportedly told a friend, "They brought me back but left me out." Even off-camera, the resentment showed. At a cast dinner celebrating the reboot, John left early. A few old jabs had been made, something about being the clown again, and John had heard enough. The press never got the full story, but those who were there said the chemistry was nothing like the original run. This was a reunion in name only. Sometimes you go back hoping to make peace, and you realize the war never really ended. John Inman. But while John navigated clashing egos and fading friendships, an entirely different storm was brewing, one rooted not in scripts or roles, but in deeply personal betrayals. When private affairs turned public scandals, the set stopped being a workplace and started feeling more like a soap opera. And John was caught in the middle of it. Affairs, cheating, and broken trust. It wasn't just rehearsals and filming that kept the cast busy. Off-camera, things got messy. Several cast members were caught up in personal relationships that bled into their professional lives. Rumors of affairs, cheating, and secret romances spread quickly. And while John Inman didn't participate, he certainly noticed and hated what it did to the group dynamic. One affair in particular became the talk of the set. Though names were never officially confirmed, insiders say it involved a married cast member and a younger production assistant. When things turned sour, arguments followed, right on set. Scenes were delayed, tension rose, and professionalism started slipping through the cracks. John saw it as a betrayal, not just of trust, but of the work itself. Another incident involved a longtime cast member who'd been flirting relentlessly backstage. When their advances were rejected, the situation turned bitter. Allegations of favoritism, angry outbursts, and even threats to leave the show came soon after. John was furious. He believed in separating work and personal life. "This isn't a love story," he reportedly told a friend. "It's a bloody sitcom." The worst moment came when one castmate leaked details to the tabloids. A private relationship, already rocky, was splashed across front pages. John, who had spent years trying to keep his private life out of the spotlight, was devastated. He feared the whole show would be defined by gossip, not comedy. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was exhausting. People forget, we weren't just co-stars, we were co-workers, and some of them broke every rule. John Inman. By the final years of his life, John had moved on from the lights, the scripts, and the costumes, but he never fully forgot what happened. Though he rarely spoke publicly about the drama, those closest to him knew the truth. Because behind the laughs, there were scars he carried quietly until the very end. What John Inman never said publicly. In public, John Inman always smiled. He kept things light, leaned into the comedy, and rarely fed the rumor mill. But behind that charm was a man who had seen the darker side of fame. Friends say John never wanted to air his grievances. He wasn't bitter, but he was hurt, deeply. Privately, he spoke of cast members who turned cold when the cameras stopped. He described moments where he felt isolated, praised by fans, but ignored by peers. "I was the one who got the laughs," he said, "but I was also the one who ate lunch alone." Those words weren't bitter, they were honest. The kind of honesty you keep tucked away until it's safe to share. He never wrote a tell-all book, never named names. But in small interviews, he left breadcrumbs. He spoke of complicated relationships, unspoken tensions, and moments I wish had gone differently. It was clear the man who made millions laugh had spent years quietly carrying disappointment. Despite it all, John remained proud of his work. He cherished the love from fans, the letters, the standing ovations. He knew Mr. Humphries had become a cultural icon. What pained him was not the role, but how the people around it had changed. The fame, the competition, the coldness. It chipped away at what once felt like family. "They gave me the spotlight. I just wish they'd given me friendship too." John Inman. So as we reflect on John's journey, from laughter to loneliness, it's time to take in the full picture. Behind the bright lights and double entendres was a man who gave his all, even when it wasn't returned. And in his silence, he left a message louder than any punchline. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's how you're treated while you're still here. Chapter 2 Behind. Mr. Humphries. John Inman made the world laugh. He gave us Mr. Humphries, a character full of life, of joy and cheeky charm. But behind that beloved figure was a man who endured jealousy, judgment, and personal betrayal. While millions adored him, some of his closest colleagues made him feel small. That contrast is what makes his story unforgettable. He never lashed out, never fought back with interviews or revenge. Instead, he chose kindness, even when he didn't always receive it. That decision speaks volumes. It shows us that true professionalism doesn't shout. It endures. It shows up. It keeps performing even when the applause feels hollow. John's story isn't just about petty fights or behind-the-scenes gossip. It's about what happens when talent outshines ego, and when one man quietly carries a show, and the weight that comes with it. His legacy lives not just in catchphrases and costumes, but in the way he handled rejection with grace. So the next time you watch Are You Being Served, remember the man behind the laughter. Remember the actor who made comedy history while privately enduring so much. Because behind the smiles was a story, one of pride, pain, and a reminder that the spotlight can be both a gift and a burden. I made them laugh. That was enough for me, even when it wasn't easy. John Inman. So there you have it, the hidden feuds, the quiet heartbreak, and the 5 co-stars who turned John Inman's laughter-filled legacy into something far more painful. He gave the world joy, but off-screen, he faced coldness, jealousy, and isolation. If this story changed the way you see Are You Being Served? Let us know in the comments. Who surprised you the most? And which side of the story do you believe? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more deep dives into TV history's untold truths. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.